figured out the spot because I have the same thing like when the air conditioner is blowing on my head, and then I know
Okay,
mine.
thank
Yes,
you.
I know which ones to go, but I don't know that one yet.
We are going to restart the briefing again,
A workshop.
and go to the order. Correct.
So then, for good of the order, we agreed yesterday at the conclusion of the workshop to continue the discussion regarding the school board hiring of a board attorney.
Okay. So with that, I just want to read our policy here. So if we could just try to stick to all this, the self-monitoring, participation and discussion, and at the end of the meeting, comments to allow an equal balance of participation from all board members. And then with Robert Rules of Order, if it states that each person should have 10 minutes with 2 rounds. So if we can try to keep on that, and I'll definitely try to time that so that way everyone has equal time to speak. And do we have consensus?
Is everybody
You
here?
don't need consensus.
Oh, you don't?
That's the board chair.
So with saying that, if I could have, I will go ahead and start with, actually, Melissa Giovanelli, Ms. Giovanelli.
Ms. Jordan, can
Oh,
I
sorry.
ask for one clarification before we start to
Please.
discuss? From Dr. Pruitt. It was my understanding when we did this interview that the sheets that each of us filled out were based solely at that time on the interview? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so in other words, anything additional, this is just one piece, correct? And anything additional that came from recommendations, outside recommendations, or the resume, or anything like that would be separate, correct? We're supposed to be basing this sheet that we filled out based solely on what we heard.
Yes, but I will say that the resume is part of that process because you have that during the interview, and you kind of can use that as you're listening to the answers to the questions. Because, sometimes because they know you have the resume, they may not say something about where they've been because you have the resume in front of you. So I don't want to say it's not, it is part of it.
Right. Yeah, I understand that it's part, but primarily, and that was how I understood your directions when we started this, primarily, we are responding, we're looking at each question, like, where do you feel, take the position, the board, like that was the second question, that we are scoring the 1 through 5 based on those answers. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And
Do you have another clarification?
I do, but she had her hand first.
Yeah.
So for
Ms.
further
Fisher?
clarification, then, the interview that took place with the group, with each individual one, would we not be considering, because I kind of followed up in my individual questioning to answers that I heard.
Yes, I mean, your one-on-one interviews, conversations that you had with the candidates clearly could have been used to follow up on some of those questions if you were looking for additional information. And I would submit that during this discussion time would be also when you might want to point out those things that maybe you didn't feel were appropriately or fully answered in the group interview, then now would be the time certainly to have that conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, so, and then also, if I may, just real quick, are we still looking at then, based off of the conversation on the style that we were looking for? Because I know that was part of the conversation yesterday. So just, because I'm trying to figure out where do we need to start this conversation back? At what part? Yes, can we please turn off our phones too? Thank you.
I just did, sorry. Oh, okay. My point of clarification is, what is our goal? As stated yesterday, we got consensus on one thing, but in a matter of this gravitude, we need a final actual vote. The consensus was there, but that is not the end of it. So I'm just wondering what are we trying to get to? Is our ultimate that we are trying to get more information, to finalize the process as to what we want? Or are we, in other people's minds, deciding on who we want at this time? So I think we need to clarify that.
Okay, so keep that in mind. Ms. Fisher?
So yesterday, our consensus was 4 people want an individual school board member. 3 people wanted a hybrid. Everyone felt like we had a viable candidate. So,
Okay, thank you for that real quick synopsis.
That's exactly what I
That's
would
what you
have
were gonna
said.
say?
So I think our discussion right now is the candidates and reaching consensus on a candidate.
Okay, and then, Ms. Morgan, is that what
Yeah,
you were
so
going to
that
share?
was
same?
essentially my comment, that we've had, we have a resume, we have a group interview, we have an individual interview. I would like to hear what everybody on the board feels about where we are,
Okay,
and I'm prepared to talk to that.
so I will start with Ms. Giovanelli then.
Well, for me, I actually liked, there was 2 candidates that stuck out for me, pretty equal, and I think my scoring showed that. One candidate, there's 2 different things that were a little bit different from each candidate brought to the table. I felt a little different. One was certified in education law, and one who wasn't, but that is, she's eligible. But the piece that the one that wasn't certified brought to the table, which is part of our strategic plan, is the community outreach and community engagement. And I think is really important because we have not had that on this board for a very long time. And I think it's really important for everyone to be on the same page and on the same page with the strategic plan as well. So at that point, for me, and not to mention that she's a minority, I think is another piece that we don't have and have not had on this board in that role. So I personally, my vote is for Mrs. Dupre Bruno. So, I don't know what else you want from me.
Okay. Ms. Morgan?
So I'm just going to make a general observation to Dr. Pruitt, and that was, I read through the questions and I thought the questions were great, but when it came to the real process, I realized how generic the questions were, and that essentially anybody who didn't have experience in education law, could respond, in a very favorable way to those questions. So that was something I learned in this process. That being said, there's only one qualified candidate. So that was Heather Wallace. That is Heather Wallace. In terms of the group interview, Heather Wallace outscored everyone, and that was basically a very generic interview. And I would say in response to Mrs. Giovanelli, that I'm not aware community engagement was written into the job description, and I don't think it's an important part of what I am looking for in the board attorney. And in the individual interview, Heather Wallace was the standout. So in every respect, I believe there's only one candidate to put forward at this point in time, and that's Heather Wallace.
Ms. Fisher?
So, looking at the, give me 1 second here. The resumes, and my high score was Ms. Bruno. And because, if you could clarify for me, why would Ms. Wallace be the only eligible candidate?
Because she's the only one certified.
But the minimum qualifications say certification in eligible, in education law or eligible for certification.
Then let me.
Point of order, people are speaking out of turn.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you.
Goodness.
Okay. So, at this time, that was my high score.
Ms. Patrica?
So she's not eligible for certification right now. She would have to engage in 50 hours of continuing legal education with specific regard to education. The next exam is in March. She told me specifically that she can't sit for the March exam. So we're looking at a minimum of a year, more than a year actually, before she can even sit for the certification exam. So she does not meet the job description, which is certified or eligible to be certified. And I compare and contrast that to, not only has Ms. Wallace been certified since, I want to say 2012, but she is a past president of that organization, and she is currently the chair of the committee that actually writes the questions for the certification exam. That to me is a glaring difference. Ms. Fisher, I think you were in, Ms. Fisher, Ms. Giovanelli, Ms. Morgan and myself. I believe we were all in Tampa for a training presented by Mr. Martin and another board attorney somewhere in the state of Florida, telling us what do you need to look for in a board attorney. And the number one thing was certification in education law. It is a very small group of people. It is a very, very small
Yes,
group of people.
it
We
is.
only have 67 school districts in the state of Florida, and some of them have their own board attorney, some of them don't, but most of them have some kind of an attorney on staff, and perhaps you have 2, 3, or 4, depending on the size of the district. When you look across the state, that's a really small group of people. And the fact that she has networked with and gotten to know the education legal experts across the state of Florida since 2012 tells me that she can hit the ground running in this position. When I look at community outreach, it is not part of the job description for a board attorney, and actually, I think it would be counterproductive to the position of board attorney, because the attorney has to sit there, very nondescript and very even-keeled, and gain the confidence of the community by being objective. And you can't be objective if you're attached to specific groups, or if you're known for community engagement or community advocacy. I think there's a little bit of confusion about the word advocacy. When I use the word advocacy with regard to the board attorney, I'm talking about advocating on behalf of the board. When I'm talking about advocacy in our position as board members, I'm talking about advocating on behalf of students in the district. And I think there's a really big difference between the two. Also, of note, the board attorney is not part of the leadership team. The leadership team is comprised of the superintendent and the 7 board members. That's it. The board attorney is there to advise the board, and you don't have 7 clients. The board attorney doesn't have 7 clients. The board attorney has 1 client, and that is the school board. And I heard the other candidate mention frequently that she wanted to go from 60 clients to 7 clients. She wanted to, looking forward to having 7, when in fact there's just 1. There is just 1 client of the school board. When I look at the past experience of the 2, Ms. Morgan, I agree with you entirely. Those questions were very generic, and they did allow it for it to sound in an oral interview like there was significant qualification on both sides. But when I look at one candidate, I see been practicing for 20 years, research and writing, litigator, prepare cases, get evidence, try cases in front of court. Unique talents and skills include soft skills, background in foster care and custody cases, on governing boards, on various boards as a community leader. None of that is what a board attorney does. None of it is what a school board attorney does. On the other hand, we have Ms. Wallace, who has background in school construction, school maintenance, real estate transactions for a school district, ESE, purchasing for a school district, charter school review, contract review for a school district, board policies, legislation, training staff, student records, public records, part of a district threat assessment team. I I think it's really, really important for us to look at the substance and the experience. Bless you. Bless you. I feel as if one candidate was qualified for one of the staff attorney positions that we have, not we, Attorney Williams has been advertising for, and the other can step into the role tomorrow and do the job. And I guess I want to make sure I had a lot of comments, so I want to make sure I have all of my comments out before I give up my time. But I'll tell you that Ms. Wallace's resume was flawless, and there were several typographical errors on the other candidate's resume, and as a person with legal education and legal background, that's a huge red flag to me. The written products that are placed out in the public on behalf of the board are representative of the public image of the board, and you know, I teach legal research and writing, that's what I do. And so those errors jump off the page at me, and I know, I tell my students all the time, if the work you submit to the opposing attorney or to the court is not perfect, they will pick up on those errors and automatically have a mental edge over you and disregard your work as being second class and less than the work that they can produce. And so, you know, any error on any resume is going to cause me great concern, but specifically in the area of law, when attention to detail is so important. I guess that's my first round of comments.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
I choose Kathy Bruno as head and shoulders above the two other candidates that were interviewed. I want to start out with the fact that she emphasized her soft skills and her communication skills. And I believe in both the group interview and also my one-on-one interview, she demonstrated those skills. And that's extremely important, that our board attorney is able to sit at the dais, listen intently to what we're saying, and to be able to respond with relative rapidity, and also be able to respond in a smooth communication. Ms. Wallace did somewhat better in our one-on-one interviews in terms of fluidity of her speaking ability, but I was unimpressed with her soft skills of communication. I was unimpressed with just the way she constructed her sentences in an oral atmosphere, okay? And I feel that that is extremely important for a board attorney. Secondly, I feel like Ms. Bruno gave extremely complete answers, which is something else, detailed oriented. This fact that she has been a successful attorney for 20 years and is a lifelong learner, and she and I talked about this in the one-on-one interview, it gives me no pause that she's not currently certified. As a matter of fact, if we go back a little bit in the history of Lee County, we have looked at other candidates that are not certified in ed law, number one. Number two, the mere fact that somebody is certified doesn't mean that that person is the best person. It just means that that person knows the rules. Another thing that I felt that was not as strong for Ms. Wallace, although I did rate her as the second highest of the three that we looked at, is the fact that in her current role and in the role that she had years ago when she was associated with Lee County, she always was a staff attorney or an assistant board attorney now, but she wasn't dealing with the parliamentary procedures. I specifically asked Ms. Bruno about that, and she indicated that the various boards that she serves on have kept her current and using the parliamentary procedure and the Roberts rules, and she had no qualms at all, no reservations about that aspect of the job of the board attorney. So another thing that impressed me with her is she did her homework. She was the person who came in here, and I've heard the comment, oh, well, she's not as, she's not certified in educational law, but she was the one that consistently, she brought up our Envision 2030. She was familiar with that. She had watched some of our meetings. She had done her homework about this district, and I want an attorney that does his or her homework on these things, and that was another plus factor for her. Another thing that I think is kind of interesting, and especially since I asked about the importance of the interview, I believe that we have an outlier for one of our interview questions, and that would be Ms. Patrica's. The interesting thing is, the last question on this, before the closing question, is, tell us about a time when your initiative at work caused a change to occur. What was the situation and the outcome? She rated it a 0. It's interesting to note that everybody else on the board rated it 3, 4, or 5. As a matter of fact, the average score and the median score was a 4. So what I'm wondering is, and Ms. Patrica's form, apparently you have some notes, but I was interested and I read the rationale that each board member wrote for, and I think that's particularly important when you score someone a 1 or maybe a 2, and certainly a 0, or a 5, that you have a reason. And I'm going through this and I'm seeing 1s and 2s on this person, and this is by far the lowest score, and the highest score was, for Ms. Wallace, was Ms. Patrica, her score. And I'm sorry, I am feeling that there might have been, going into this, a pre-existing reason why before the interview, and maybe when Ms. Patrica has another turn to talk, she can tell us why.
Ms. Vaughn, can you please focus on the comments and not about other members?
Well, this is on the comments. I'm looking for comments, and what I'm saying is, if somebody scored this person so much lower, and this person lost 5 points for a 0, and I have no reason to understand why that is, and everybody else scored much higher. I feel like the fact that Ms. Wallace has these close connections, prior connections with the district, might prejudice her in terms of being unbiased toward things. And I realize that Mr. Martin was a revered staff member for many, many years, but she seemed to rely an awful lot on throwing it out there that, well, Mr. Martin was my mentor, Mr. Martin was my mentor. Well, that's great, but Mr. Martin is retired, and this is a new era. This is a new era, and we have a different view, perhaps. And to summarize, I feel that Ms. Bruno was knowledgeable, that some of the areas where people knocked her down on scores, such as how do you stay current I heard that she has, and I have not looked this up, Westlaw, educational, that she talked about the educational bar, that it was a small group of people. She emphasized both in the group interview and in my one-on-one that networking is important to her, and that she would network. She mentioned in the group interview FSBAA, so she's familiar with that, the National School Board Association, and again, the mentoring. So I have no qualms about the fact that she doesn't have this certification in hand, because I'm guessing that not everybody in the legal department has that certification, and historically, it has not been demanded by Lee County Schools. So that closes my remarks.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
Okay, first let me preface my comments with, I have, and I've spoken this from the dais, a concern about the way the process was conducted. And it's nothing new to any of you, I brought this up before. I feel that there was just I'm not accusing anyone, but that there was some coercion going on. My question is, and I know we saw the process, but I'm not sure we were aware that, for example, with the directors or whatever doing the pre-screening, I still am unaware why that was actually necessary. This is a board position, and we 7 people here are the ones that will hire our employee. So I was just a little concerned about that. I don't know if, to what extent we advertise with FSBA and FSBAA. I just find it strange that there were so few people that replied to that. I just want to put that out there. And also in that pre-selection and in that first decision as to who we were going to interview, I have to say this, and no offense to Mr. Khan, but there were other resumes in that group that had a lot more experience, that did have a lot more time on the job, things that they had done that, in my opinion, fit more into what we were looking for. So I don't know how everybody came about choosing the 3 people, but especially that third one. When we were admonished and instructed by Dr. Pruitt in the beginning, we were told on the forms that if you have a low number, like a 1 or a 2, or a high number, a 4 or 5, that it is usually you put a reason why. And you can go back and look at the video on that. So I found it very strange, too, that Ms. Patrica did not have any comments for the 1s and 2s, but on Ms. Wallace, for her 4s and 5s, there were comments. So that was just very strange to me. As far as my choice would be Ms. Bruno, for the reason, the eligibility that was talked about, it's the only reason that she is not eligible to take the test in March is the timing of this interview. When I discussed it with her, she would be ready to go and do it immediately, and she did check to see when she could do it at her earliest convenience to be able to take the test. Because the way the dates of the test are is the only reason that she is not, quote-unquote, eligible to take that test tomorrow or next week. So it's not like she's not eligible or not wanting to do it. The test is given at certain times, and that the timing of this means that she doesn't have time to apply for it in March. So I just want the record to show It's not like she's not eligible or doesn't want to do it. It was the timing of the test itself. One of the things that I think is really, really important for our board attorney is parliamentary procedure. And parliamentary procedure, because a large part of keeping this group on task and in the right lane, per se, is knowing parliamentary procedure. Ms. Bruno has extensive experience in parliamentary procedure in various genres. And I also think that, well, I'll go back to that in a second. There was a point mentioned about the attorney-client going from 100 down to 7. Yes, the person would be collectively our attorney, but as we all know, we all, on a regular basis, do and have the ability and the right to call the attorney with any questions that we might have. And you all know that I wanted the hybrid, but if this is the situation, I don't feel that was a wrong statement to make, because that person is collectively, relating to the 7 of us. And we all have different opinions at different times, which leads me to the next thing for Ms. Bruno, that she is a certified board mediator. And I know that's important. I had that designation. I did it and used to be a mediator on the East Coast. What it does teach you is the ability to be able to resolve situations and to communicate better with people. I won't say concerned, but Ms. Wallace has been in the secondary position and has not been the leader or the lawyer or in court. And I agree with Ms. Vaughn. There was a lot of discussion about her relationship with Mr. Martin. And I say this, and I've said it in the community and everywhere if someone asks me, we are not where we were 10 years ago. We are now a $1.6 billion corporation. With growth comes the need to grow. If we continue to look back, we can't see what's in front of us. And to give the opportunity to move forward with a different type of attorney, with a different attitude that does not have ties to our past, I think we need to relish the fact of bringing in new ideas and bringing in a global personality as opposed to always looking back at what we used to do. And no offense to anyone that was here previously, but we are growing expeditiously, and we need to grow in our processes and procedures. So basically, that is why I'm supporting Ms. Bruno.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess it's my turn. In reading the job description, I had seen where, the area, especially we're supposed to look at education law. So I think that's where the third person came in, because that was all over the resume. And a resume can be anything. But I think that's where we pull that third person in from. No disrespect to him. But also, when you look at the job description as well, it states, eligible for certification. It doesn't state when that will be, but it does allow that privilege to have that done. Relationships, we're always going to have relationships for both of them. Ms. Wallace, because of the fact she was here, she does have those relationships. There's nothing we can do about that. Ms. Bruno, on the other hand, she has relationships with everyone here because she's been here for such a long time. That's something that, is going to be. We all have relationships with other people, whether it's in the district or out of the district. But I do feel that Ms. Bruno did actually do her research. She was definitely prepared. I know she read every policy, and she was prepared for that. She had them with her. I spoke to her about the policies. She was prepared to speak on any of those. I felt that Ms. Wallace, for being in the district, she was kind of, in the general interview that we all had with her, I felt that she was kind of, I don't know, shy or quiet, not as, not tooting her own horn, if you will, of saying what she really has done. In our meetings, one-on-one, she elaborated a little bit more on that, and so did Ms. Bruno. I mean, she definitely elaborated on that. So, and I do think that we have to have somebody that does have soft skills and has the ability to keep a level head and make sure that, you know, we're doing what we're supposed to do, because I believe that they are, you know, they have to help us to make sure that we are not crossing that line as well. Even though they work for us, you know, keeping us on track on where we need to be. And I just think that Ms. Wallace is, I don't know how she would be, because she told me she's never been on the dais, so she does not have that experience when we spoke about that. And I know that in speaking with Ms. Bruno, she's willing to do whatever she has to do in order to get the job done. And I even asked too, because my question was, and it may be crazy because I know I probably was the worst scorer of everybody. I was very neutral because of the fact, I don't know what's on paper, if that's true or fiction. And so unless I actually see what they do, so I was pretty neutral on my scoring. But I do think that when I was asking, well, this is a new job for, and I asked both of them this is a new job. How do you just walk into this new job as an attorney and know what all our needs are, or the district's needs are? Making sure that we're doing what we need to do. And, you know, and I did get from one saying, I will ask the questions. I'm going to research, I'm going to find out, I'm going to find that answer. And that was Ms. Bruno, and I did not get that from Ms. Wallace. And I'm not saying that I believe that she has the experience and everything, but I don't know if that's, and I don't think there was any kind of premeditated or conversation prior to this. I don't believe any of that ever took place. But right now, just based on being able to take care of and be eligible, I would probably say I would feel more comfortable with Ms. Bruno. So now we go back to our second rounds. So Ms. Mary Fisher.
Okay, because I did not say much before, but I have had experience on this board for 10 years now. And yes, as Ms. Morgan started out with her comments before, this is a different day. Things have changed. We have grown. Our population is very different. And we have made some changes and stepped out and received people on our staff from outside of the district who have really enhanced our performances, for one thing. So in looking at the school board attorney job description, I think that certification in education law or eligibility for certification, I mean, almost everybody would be eligible. And if it's a matter of timing, I don't think that that's something that we need to strongly consider. When you look at the other essential job functions, so I can't remember if it was one of the staff attorneys or if it was someone from Weiss Sirota, but they did say that what they do as the board attorney has very little to do with education law. So in looking at the essential job functions, you know, advocate to support the legislative platform, recommend outside counsel to handle the coordination of issues regarding issues involving the school board.
I'm not sure I understand.
Including all,
I had that off.
Are
She'll
you
explain it.
recording this?
Oh, it's off. It's Siri.
Please turn that off.
It's off.
Okay, so all litigation matters, including civil matters, federal and state issues, and constitutional issues. Serve as parliamentarian, and then provide in-service training on legal matters, which, you know, a lot of this has nothing to do with sunshine law, it's other state and federal mandates. Assume responsibility for drafting policies and resolutions. Keep the school board and superintendent informed, okay? Prepare or approve as to form all contracts entered into on behalf of the school board. And then all contracts that are not presented by a staff attorney. So I know that Mr. Williams had provided us back in November a list of tasks that would be assumed by his legal team, which is still in the formative stages. I felt that Ms. Bruno definitely did her homework, and I think you might have seen that I put prepared and did her homework on my comments in several places. I was extremely impressed with the amount of knowledge that she brought about this district, about this board, and about this community. And soft skills aside, she presented and articulated very strongly. So those were primarily the reasons. The information that she was able to share with us as a group and with me privately, I felt was definitely indicative of her abilities to handle a job of this magnitude, a district of 95,000 students with as many employees as we have, and to keep the board informed, because she definitely is a worker, a researcher, and has a myriad of experiences in the community with many different law firms, and has even worked in Washington, and she has represented students and parents in special education idea matters. She's attended IEP conferences, and she has assisted as a managing partner on federal litigation cases regarding IDEA, which addresses our special needs students. She also has experience in family law, and we deal with a lot of family law issues in this school district, and I know that from my past experience as a school counselor, as a worker in the Student Services Department, and also as a state certified family mediator. So I think that she really had, she was my high score because of the information she provided, the experience that she was able to relate, and the amount of preparation she provided for herself for the interview. Thank you.
My turn?
Sorry. Yes, please.
Okay, so for me, I still would agree with actually everything a lot of people have said, but a couple things I want to point out is we have had numerous workshops regarding board attorney, and I remember one of the things was the eligibility for certification that I believe it might have been Dr. Pruitt said that we could put in a contract and allow time for them to get their certification. I'm a firm believer in that because we've been pushing for that for our own teachers to have the certification, and they'll have additional time for that. So why wouldn't we do the same for our own board of attorney and allow them a certain, a year or so to get their certification? So I think that we need to practice what we preach. I also am very confident in her overall her interview. I liked Ms. Wallace a lot. And she was very nice, but I just feel that Ms. Bruno just brought a piece to the table that was, I don't know, she excelled in that. Just very calm, and I just think she just would be a great asset to this team. And that's the two things that I wanted to bring up, was the fact that we can put in her contract a time frame for her to be certified, and we do it for our teachers. I don't see the problem in doing it for our board attorney. Thank you.
So, just a few last comments. The best interviewee is not always the best candidate. And I think I think we're hearing a lot about, I like the interview, I liked her, I like the interview, but if you actually look at the qualifications between the two candidates, Ms. Jordan, you mentioned, how do we know that what's on paper is true? That was what staff did. That was why staff engaged in the process that they engaged in order to narrow the search, was to confirm that people are actually members of the bar, they are actually certified as they said they were, they did actually work in the places they said they worked. That was the whole point of the chiefs and Dr. Pruitt becoming involved. We have two attorneys in front of us who have been successful attorneys for approximately 20 years. But please, and I'm not being sarcastic, I am not going to a cardiac surgeon to have my knee replaced. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody who is skilled in litigation and community activism. We're not talking about somebody who's skilled in education law. And it is a very specific area of law, especially if you've been practicing for 20 years, you've really narrowed your focus. There was talk of IDEA and family law. That's a staff attorney position. That's not a board attorney position. That is a staff attorney position. Those are things that staff attorneys deal with. Now, it's important for the board attorney to have an understanding of those issues. And that's the other thing, is I really see the education law in the state of Florida like this magnificent, amazing, think of like the spider web that a wolf spider creates. Like just absolutely amazing, sometimes mind-numbingly frustrating web of laws. When you pull on one tiny little string of that web, the entire web moves. And to hire an attorney who understands ESE and IDEA and perhaps has served as parliamentarian on a community board, doesn't bring to the table someone who has the ability to understand that a change in policy 4.21 also impacts policy 1.32, and that a change in law regarding teacher pay or whatever it is that's going to come down from Tallahassee is also going to impact the rest of the district and the way the rest of the district functions. I don't think that we, as the 9th largest school district in this state and the 32nd largest school district in the country, have the luxury of training someone how to be an education lawyer. And I feel like that's what we would have to do. We're kind of glossing over the importance of education certification, but it is part of the job description. And today, she is not eligible. If you look on the education certification website, you have to have 50 hours of education-related continuing legal education. She does not have that. She would have to take all 50 hours before she could sit for the test next year. And I mean, I understand law. I get it. I understand how it works. I worked in that area for a while. I have a law degree. The thought of becoming the board attorney for a district of this size while conducting 50 hours of continuing legal education that in and of itself is really, really overwhelming to me. The fact that Ms. Wallace has not sat at the table, first of all, that's not true. She did sit as a parliamentarian when she was here in Lee County. So she does have experience sitting at this specific board table. And with only 67 school board attorneys in the state of Florida, most applicants are not going to have significant experience sitting at a board table. I sit at other board tables. You know, I sit on my HOA board. I sit on community organization boards. And the skills required to be the parliamentarian in those meetings does not remotely compare to the skills required to be the parliamentarian at a meeting for an organization that has a $1.644 billion budget and is likely the most regulated industry in the state of Florida. So I implore my colleagues to please look at qualifications over form. The notion that close prior connections to the district would prejudice her is, I don't know another word other than absurd. I mean, she's an attorney, she's licensed, she knows how to conduct herself as a professional, and knowledge of not just the way Lee County conducts its business, but the way the school districts across the state conduct their business is very important. FSBA don't conduct attorney searches, so we wouldn't turn to them for candidates. That's not a function of those organizations. Ms. Giovanelli, you're absolutely right. We're seeking to give teachers more time for certification after they've proven that they are effective or highly effective. We have a candidate in front of us who has proven that she's effective and highly effective. I spoke with Carol Cook up in Pinellas. You all know Carol Cook. We've all worked with Carol Cook. She is on the board there, and she is very sorry to see Heather go. And she has been nothing but happy with the work that Heather has brought in front of that board and the work product that she has produced over the time that she's been there. Ms. Bruno is a certified mediator, but Gwen, that makes her no more certified to be a board attorney than it does you as a certified mediator. And I know you're not applying for board attorney position, but my point is that doesn't make you uniquely qualified for a position that requires unique qualifications. And you're right, we've changed. We're bigger, it's 2020. But the things that were said about Mr. Martin hurt my heart because he was the premier education attorney in the state of Florida the day he retired from this board. He left this board, and any education attorney in the state of Florida would tell you he's number one. So the fact that she relies on him for mentorship and guidance and advice actually is very impressive to me. Those are my second round of comments.
Ms. Gittens?
Well, I have no qualms about the fact that Mr. Martin was the premier education lawyer. And I believe when we went through the process, no, I wasn't even here then, I think when Mr. Dodick was chosen, but I did watch the interviews. And there was, again, constant remarks about referring to Mr. Martin. As hard and as harsh as it may sound, he is no longer here, and we need to look at moving forward. And that's all I'll say about that. A couple of other things. There's been reference to soft skills. Soft skills do not equate to a soft or less than knowledgeable individual. So from what I have seen of Ms. Bruno, she is a business owner, she is a leader, she is very smart, very adaptable, and I know, Ms. Patrica and y'all keep saying, okay, she needs to hit the ground running, but one of the things that I'm concerned about with Ms. Wallace is that in her group interview, she mentioned the fact that she answered one question, and part of her answer was, I think I said, what group, because here in this position, we're talking about one person, and what are you used to working with? And she mentioned, because I wrote it down, the board attorney, the assistant board attorney, and the staff attorney. In my one-on-one in talking with her, she spoke again about working with the staff attorney and the superintendent. And I understand there's a relationship that has to be built there, but I also believe that we as a board that, again, it's our employee that reports to us that, and not saying that either one of them would not understand that, but I just think there needs to be that fine line of definitiveness, that it is our employee and not the employee of the staff. The parliamentary procedure that we talked about with Ms. Bruno is not an HOA, it's a national organizations, and she's had quite a bit of parliamentary procedure experience. And you did mention that taking classes of 50 hours is overwhelming to you, Ms. Patrica, but I truly believe that the tenacity and the stick-to-itiveness, which is a made-up word, does not limit Ms. Bruno's ability to do that, to do whatever is required. I just feel we need to turn the page, we need to move forward, and also I continue to go back to the hybrid situation, that whoever gets in this position, right now, today, Weiss Schroeder has done so many things and has their hands in so many things, involved with staff attorneys, involved with things that we do, and whoever comes in, there has to be a passing or a sharing of the baton in order to keep those things going. The race doesn't stop here, but that's why I'm strongly suggesting, even if it were Ms. Wallace, the baton has to be passed or shared with the next person to be able to do all of the things that need to be done. And I feel that that is a strong reason why we should look at maintaining Weiss Schroeder as that recommended outside counsel. And I would like to ask also, I know there's been a lot of discussion about Weiss Schroeder and saying that they only have one amount and they refuse to take any more. And if I may ask the question, if there were a hybrid situation, would they be willing or available to give us a different price for that relationship as opposed to the relationship we have with them now?
Madam Chair, can we keep our comments to the subject in front of us right now?
This is the subject.
No.
Okay, so I know, look, I know I'm going to be outvoted on it. I need to get it out there, so you can shut me down. But the question is there, and I would like to have an answer to that question at some point. Thank you.
You still have time.
Well, they're telling me I can't
Still have
ask.
time to speak on the action at hand regarding
And the
the
action
attorneys,
at hand
regardless
is-
of not pulling in another attorney.
Okay. The action at hand is, again, I go, I haven't changed. I still go for Ms. Bruno for the points that I've already made. And I still feel that whoever is successful in this process should be working with Weiss Schroeder, our current attorney.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Okay, I want to start out by responding to a few of the comments that have been made, and then I'll end with reiterating why I think Ms. Kathy Dupuy Bruno is not only our best choice, but the only choice, the only one that I would consider to be viable. First of all, it's been my experience that often the person who looks best on the page with the perceived experience, with the perceived degrees, is often the biggest disappointment. And I base that on prior experience. When I was in Texas, I did have times that I had to interview people and weigh in because I had a slightly different role than just a regular teacher. So I do have experience with this and with including vetting a couple principal candidates that came to our school. And that really is often the case. Just because you have a degree in something doesn't automatically make you the expert in that particular thing. Ms. Bruno has 20 years' experience as an attorney, and she's worked in various venues, including Washington, D.C., so she has lots of different experience. I think it's insulting to her background to say that should she be our choice, we would be training her. No, she's the kind of person, and this was something that we talked about in the one-on-one. She's the kind of person that researches. She's the kind of person that seeks out answers. She's the kind of person that has a really high, she sets the bar, no pun intended, she sets the bar very high for herself. And to me, that was evident in both the group interview and in the individual interview. And I am familiar with what Ms. Bruno does in the community, and I know that she not only has been a leader, and I don't see that leadership ability in Ms. Wallace. Ms. Wallace has mostly been in lower level positions reporting to others in a group setting. Somebody mentioned it to staff, I mean, she hasn't had to be the leader the way Ms. Bruno has, both in community things and also as a business owner. She's a self-starter. Okay. Regarding getting those 50 hours, when we talked about that in my individual interview, she said, oh, that's no problem at all, because she does the CLEs, the continuing education, on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, she is definitely the lifelong learner. And she said the problem is not to do the 50 hours, because that would be something she would do anyway. But again, the timing of the test, and there was no way that she could get in the 50 hours and take the test in, I mean, it was just impossible. It's the timing of the interview. If this interview were going on in April, she'd be there. Okay. I don't feel that Ms. Bruno's scope is narrow. She has a broad scope of what she has dealt with in other legal firms besides her own. Her firm deals with various issues. As was mentioned, she is a mediator. She knows about issues in the schools. She expressed, very definitively expressed her, I said, well, why do you want to change? And one of the big things is she wanted to be there in the educational system, that she cares very deeply about children and about quality education. And she really, I felt in both the individual interview as well as the group interview, she made that a point. As far as the intricacies of legal law and the various statutes and all of that, and the analogy of pulling one thread and everything else is affected, I have no qualms about Ms. Bruno's expertise as an attorney, her attorney skills, that she will be able to deal with those things, because I can't imagine that it is only in the world of education law that you don't have things like that occur. She's a skilled attorney, and I don't see that as a problem. Ms. Wallace has consistently worked in a model that is not the model that we are using here. And so we would have to soft train her or whatever, however you want to put it, to adapt to the model that we as a board have decided works better for us. Finally, I feel like Ms. Bruno, when the interview was head and shoulders above the other two interviews, and I think you can't just keep going back. I agree with what Ms. Fisher said in terms of, and I think Ms. Giovanelli said about a contract. We put it in the contract that she attained this within the reasonable amount of time, probably that would be March 2021, and I have no doubt that she's going to fulfill that obligation. I think that to put everything on legal education, legally certified in education law, I think that's really, that's narrowing our scope in who we select. Because if we had another set of candidates and we had someone, we had a group of people that were education law certified, would that mean any one of those would work? It wouldn't matter? I mean, don't we, when we interview people, don't we look for the things that we can't determine from looking at a piece of paper, from looking at a degree, because somebody has a law degree, because someone has passed the bar? Does that automatically make them a wonderful attorney? No, it doesn't. And I think that from her very, very complete resume, albeit, and I missed the typos, albeit a few typos, to her extraordinary, to me, interview, both group and individual, that she is the only one that I consider to be a viable choice. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
So I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, there was only one candidate who was able to answer my question: what is the difference between a board attorney and a staff attorney? What is the difference in terms of their roles, responsibilities? Who do they interact with? Only one person was able to answer that question. What is the job, and why is staff so important, and why has staff been involved in this process? The job is property and tax law, policy, charters, grants. All of those things are the things that make up the job of the school board attorney. Those are the things that the school board attorney spends a considerable amount of time with staff. One candidate asked me, so, how does a board attorney spend their time? This was one who hadn't been on a board. How does a board attorney spend their time? How much time do they spend with board members? And I said, well, a significant amount of their time is spent with staff working on the legal implications of policy that's being drafted, protocols that are being developed, and to a much lesser extent with the school board individually. Typically, there is very little interaction between school board members individually and the board attorney, because the board attorney is watching out for the business of the board, not the business of individual board members. So I wanted to make that clear. Now, with respect to the experience and skill set of Ms. Bruno, she has the identical skill set and experience set of Rob Dodick. Rob Dodick was all about the kids, and he had all of the IEP and all of the student services and all of the staff stuff. He did that as staff attorney. And his soft skills with respect to mediation and that kind of thing were very strong. So when in fact, in my notes, you will see in my notes on the group interview that I thought Kathy Bruno would be a perfectly fine staff attorney for the school board, because she has the skill set and the interpersonal, she has the interpersonal skills that we need to work with families and children and professionals in the area of student services. I don't think, now, and then to the training. Frankly, I believe we've lost a lot of ground in the last 2 years as a school board because we have not had a board attorney in place. Staff is struggling to manage their workload because they don't have somebody on premises who is able to respond to them and somebody who is familiar with the system. So we are really scrambling. I would be less concerned about somebody coming in with no school board experience if we were not already in a hole. And I believe we're in a hole, and I believe that what this district and what this school board needs is the knowledge, the content knowledge, and the skill set that an experienced school board attorney would bring to the district and to the school board. I don't want to go through another year, a third year of a board attorney on training wheels. So that is, I feel that Heather Wallace, just on the basis of her experience, is just so much better qualified than Ms. Bruno. And I believe that she has, based on my conversations with people who have worked with her, all of the soft skills that you're looking for that would be needed by us and the staff. So I am 100% in support of Ms. Wallace. I am very concerned about Ms. Bruno in this position.
Thank you. Oh, my goodness. I know, and thank you, Ms. Patrica, I do understand that they go through all of this, but in my own mind, if I don't see a person, I want to know what they're doing.
No, I understand.
Yeah. But yes, and looking at Ms. Wallace's resume, she has, every single thing that she has on here is pertaining to the district. Mr. Martin, I never knew the man, so I really, that has no bearing on anything that Ms. Wallace would have to say. And I just felt like in speaking to both of them, even though I see that Ms. Wallace, what she has on paper, and I see what Ms. Bruno, I just felt that, and I'm not a person that constantly goes and speaks to an attorney, but I just felt that in speaking to both of them, I did feel, I think, more relaxed speaking with Ms. Bruno and receiving an answer from her pretty much immediately after I asked the question versus Ms. Wallace. And I don't know, I just felt that she felt uncomfortable for some reason in doing this. It's not every day that I interview for attorney positions, but I just need to, to me, it's really important that they, not only that they do the job, that they feel that they can, that they're accessible to us, and that we can, if we have that need to go in and speak to them, we have that opportunity. And yeah, I mean, to me, they're both qualified, but as far as if I had to choose one over the other as an individual person, I think I would go with Ms. Bruno, only because I feel that she did have, there was no questions on her answers. Everything that was asked of her, she answered immediately. And she was definitely prepared, totally prepared. And even though she wasn't feeling good, she was still here and she was still prepared. And then in the office, when I was speaking to her one-on-one, and I did question her regarding the comment about community, being out in the community, being paid for it, I did ask her that question, because that kind of caught me off guard when that comment came out, and she said, well, it was a joke. I said, well, sometimes when I heard it, I didn't take it as a joke, but that was a little bit concerning to me, because I don't, even though I know that they're involved in community, they're not part of the community. That is not their job to do that. And I still feel that at this point, I still feel that Ms. Bruno would still be the better person, only because of the interaction that I had with her versus what I had with Ms. Wallace. And I have to go on how I feel as an individual with these people, with the person. So that's all I have to say. So, I'm sorry? So I'm not sure, where do we go from here, Mr. Quick?
I think I would, it sounds to me like it's a 5-2 is the way you're leaning, so I think I would just confirm direction to staff so that, or assign a board member, if you so choose, but somebody to reach out to the chosen person to negotiate or what sounds like the chosen person has to say, to negotiate a contract that could be brought back to the board at an action meeting at the earliest possible date, so that you guys can potentially approve that and then, get the new person on board.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Is it possible to bring it for good of the order?
Not without a contract.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I mean, I would wait, I mean, I would
Okay.
take the consensus today, and like I said, either have staff negotiate, or if you're comfortable with an individual board member, however the board chooses, whatever your preference is. And that way you can bring something formal back so that you can approve it right, that day, and then, she would then, could commence. I mean, it's not like we would change, like she wouldn't come up here and I would come down, but, she could start, whatever the effective date would be, whether it's the next day or whatnot. And then, our office will obviously work with whomever it is you choose to ensure that there's a seamless and successful transition.
Well, thank you for that.
And I have one more question. I know that it was a 3-4 vote about the hybrid and using Weiss-Schroeder. I'm wondering, is there any way that, since that's not a firm decision, and based on our discussions today, can we revisit that? And in that vein, perhaps have them give us what that would look like from the attorney, from Weiss-Schroeder's point of view.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fisher?
So in regard to that, I think that once we have chosen a school board attorney, it would be incumbent on the school board attorney to survey and recommend firms. And I did have a conversation with Mr. Williams, and he said in some districts, what they do is the board attorney actually puts out a request for proposals from different firms. And I think that we have, in addition to Weiss-Schroeder, we have other firms who have historically done business with the school district of Lee County and may currently, as our Weiss-Schroeder, be involved in some of the cases. So I think that once the board attorney is in place, that would be his or her job to handle that part of it. May I ask Mr. Williams, is that a good interpretation of our conversation?
That is accurate. While there is an exception to procurement that doesn't require you to solicit for legal services, for example, in Miami, we did historically do that. And what it did was it allowed us to select multiple firms in multiple areas. You can designate that distinction in the RFP or RFQ. You can interview those firms. You can have them submit proposals with respect to their experience. Typically in a situation like that, obviously if Weiss-Schroeder puts in a proposal, if they're selected, which there's a high probability there would be, that would happen given their experience with the district, they would just be one of multiple firms, so they could be utilized. Typically, you break that down by, let's say, real estate, construction, various matters, so that you have bona fide experts in each of those areas.
Thank you.
Okay, and I absolutely agree with what was just clarified by Mr. Williams and what Ms. Fisher brought up, that, to me, that sounds like something that our selection for an attorney, that we can move at that point. If it's appropriate, I would like to call for the sort of consensus it appears that it's 5-2, but is that the appropriate move now so that we can direct the staff to start working on a contract for our candidate?
Yes, I think it's appropriate, and that way the staff can get moving on it as quickly as possible instead of waiting for a future. And like I said, obviously, you will have to have a formal vote to actually hire the person, but I think it's appropriate to at least give guidance to staff, and then we can staff can bring back a proposed contract, and that will be what will be voted on by the board to finalize or go whichever direction the board decides.
How long would, obviously not tonight, but the next school board meeting in 2 weeks, that we could have, what would be the next steps exactly? The staff works on the contract, and I'm assuming that the contract's not going to, be from scratch, that we have a working basis to start from, and then the contract comes to the board in an action meeting. Is that how it would be, or a workshop or an action meeting? What would be the exact steps?
So staff will take direction today. We would work with them, and I'm sure if Mr. Williams' office wants to be involved, but we would work with them to create a proposed contract. Would reach out to Miss Dupuy-Bruno. She, will, obviously she'll analyze it, and she may have some proposed revisions which we can go over as to whether the board can live with them. And then in terms of timing, I guess part of it would depend on that interaction. Part of it also would depend on notice requirement. So it would either be, conceivably, if it happens extremely quickly, it could conceivably happen at the March meeting. It may be the end of March. We'd also have to talk to Ms. Dupuy-Bruno because she's going to have some wind down requirements for her existing clients, assuming it's Ms. Dupuy-Bruno. So we would have to, staff will work with her in terms of a start date so that it works with her, so that, because she has obligations to wind down for her clients and make sure they have representation as well of when she's leaving those clients.
And I just have a question too. When does your contract expire?
It goes to the end of April, but it's terminable at will. So, if she starts at the April 1, we're not going to say, no, we're end of April. Or if for some reason she were to want to start, mid-May, we'll work with you guys and prorate it. I mean, we'll work with you guys as to whatever the timing works for the board as well as the new board attorney.
Thank you. Ms. Patrica, I'm sorry, thank you.
So then I'd like to ask for that.
Well, I was going to ask Dr. Pruitt, is there any?
You want to add to that?
No, I mean, I'm comfortable, and we'll take whatever direction you give to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Swan?
Oh, that was it. I got clarification on exactly what steps and an idea of the timing and, different ways it could shake out. And so I'd like to call for an official consensus on our candidate.
I have one question. So what the consensus, you're on reaching consensus with staff to reach out to Mrs. Bruno to negotiate a contract. That's as far as that's going right now? Is that correct?
Right. Correct.
So do you want to state that, or do someone need to state it?
I think Mary stated it pretty well, but if the
Is that right?
Yeah. I think so.
So can we call for consensus for
Kathy Dupree.
Kathy Dupuy-Bruno to be offered, or to come up with a contract for her, to start working on that?
yes, you can do.
Okay.
So 5 to 2 can deal with it?
Could I just clarify, would we be working directly with the board chair? Because sometimes there is some back and forth, so I just want to make sure that that's appropriate.
I'd be comfortable with that.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So, do we have any other, can I close it? at
Must,
that?
I think that wraps up the issues on terms of the board attorney, and we'll be back here in about 35 minutes.
Okay, so in saying that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.